Welcome to another live show. And today I'm joined with Will Hobick is an awesome guy from and I mean Flutterflow itself, not like my Flutterflow, but Flutterflow itself. And today he's gonna be teaching us about database. All those database questions that you get to ask me. How does database work? How is it not working? How to set up a very good database. Will is going to be showing us how to think of setting a database real quick, and also some of the things that you must know before you set up a database, and how to set up a database for different business types. So if you have a question, feel free to leave it in the comment section, or you can leave it in the chat right away. Will, welcome.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited to chat over, like we said, database structure and best practices when building not only a Flutterflow app, but just building applications in general, right? Those are things that are essential when you want to scale beyond maybe an MVP or something like that. So definitely excited to kind of take a deeper dive. We'll start maybe in Flutterflow and outlining maybe best practices there. Then we'll jump into Firebase and actually showcasing what that structure would look like too. And then we can also discuss some other database options, right? You'll know that Flutterflow, we really have an emphasis on Firebase, given
Yeah.
that was the first database we integrated with. And for some users, it's really powerful as a NoSQL database, but we've also seen a lot of interest on the SQL side, right? So we'll talk about Supabase. We'll talk about some of the other partners we're looking to either integrate into Flutterflow or release marketplace templates for. So stick around. I'll talk about all that a little bit later. But yeah, let me share my screen and we can jump right into Flutterflow.
Yeah, sure. Will, before you share your screen and start to deep dive into Flutterflow,
For
a
sure.
lot of folks don't really understand the difference between the SQL database and the NoSQL database. So when you get to Flutterflow and you begin to see things like, document reference, relationship. So it's not like for those persons who come in from the MySQL space, it's a bit difficult. There's no private key, there's no public key, there's no
Yeah.
stuff like that. Do you want to share some experience? Why is Flutterflow using the NoSQL database, and what's the difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the key things that actually comes down to is Firebase as just a general backend. And as you may know, Flutterflow started as a mobile only tool, right? Flutter had a real emphasis on mobile, and so Flutterflow in that case went the direction of building mobile applications to start. Now, of course, we're fully responsive, so you can build web applications, all of that. But Firebase specifically was one of the best solutions for mobile databases at that time, right? So that was to us the best solution because Firebase, it's supported by Google, right? So it's a large backend solution that hopefully we wouldn't have too many problems with. Now, in terms of NoSQL versus SQL, there's a lot of there is a bit of a learning curve for both, right? If you're coming from a SQL database and you're trying to learn NoSQL, it can be a little bit confusing the way data is laid out or the relationships
Yeah.
between each set, right? And vice versa. I know we just released the migrating from Bubble, which is a SQL database,
Yeah.
to Flutterflow,
Fine.
right? And one of the things you have to do is add user IDs for all your data, and that way it's actually set up to relate to each other. In Firebase, the way you should be approaching your database setup is you need to have lots of collections, and in those
Yeah.
collections, you need to have documents, a ton of documents, but those documents should only contain a limited set of data, right?
Yeah.
So Firebase is made to make a ton of documents, a ton of them. We make a change in Flutterflow for every property you change in Flutterflow. So imagine the millions of documents getting changed and updated,
Yeah.
right? Whereas SQL is a little different, right? You're structuring data and the way it's laid out in your application a little different. You're referencing that data in rows and columns, and if you're a big user of something like Excel or most other backend solutions, right? Typically, backend solutions are SQL backend solutions. So that's where the two really differ.
Yeah, so for people for persons who are jumping in from the SQL side of things, for example, I had to learn SQL. I was programming before, so I did SQL first. Trust me, before not until I started using Flutterflow, before I realized there was something called NoSQL database. I knew there was other things because PHP was like the whole backend framework. So PHP tied a lot with SQL. So I didn't go close to MongoDB and the rest. So for somebody like me, or other persons who will be jumping from the SQL side of things to the NoSQL side of things, what should be what should they have in mind? I mean, what should they learn first before you know dumping everything in there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to say you're going to have to get very used to document references and using those at scale, especially referencing things via like user IDs, right? Um, One of the things I actually realized yesterday, so this is good timing, we're having this conversation. The way Firebase, for example, or a NoSQL database structures their rule generation and the
Yeah,
language used for typing rules and writing your rules is very different from the way a SQL database would do it. The terms are different, right? They use terms like documents, document paths, and all of that, which would be a little bit different than if you were writing rules for a SQL database. So really the key things I would say is when it comes to writing your security side of things, that's going to be a bit of a learning curve, right? You're going to have to learn the language, learn the way um, the the document paths and everything are structured when you're writing rules, and then also just the way you're structuring your data within a document too. Right? You need to get used to having document IDs and being familiar with creating large, uh, small documents, but lots of documents for data too.
awesome, awesome. I bet you can really wait to show us how this works with Flutterflow. Let's jump into
Yeah,
Flutterflow and see how it
awesome.
works. Yeah.
Cool. Can you see the Flutterflow builder?
Yes, I'm gonna just pull that in right
Nice.
there.
Perfect.
Yeah. So with that,
Nice. So we're in the Flutterflow builder, and what I'm showing you is an app I was working on. It's a meal prep app, right? So you would go through and you would sign in. Of course, we have the basic auth pages. Then when you're creating your account, you're just going through and selecting different things. So here I have like ingredients, and I'm pulling this ingredient list from my backend, right? Allergens, diet options, all of these, right? And some of the things I'll also touch on in a little bit would be the new backend caching feature that we have, which is going to be really
yeah, I love that. I love that. It makes the
nice.
app like 10x faster than it is right now.
Yes.
I really love
Yes.
that.
Yes. Yeah. You don't have to worry about the loading indicator or loading states, right? If you're going to be using backend caching for a lot of places, because ideally that information is going to load instantly, right?
Yeah,
Um, so here we have this app, right? In this, we would have a dashboard with meals, meal details, profile with information, company information. And I'll talk about too the way I tend to structure some of the applications I build.
yeah,
We get a lot of requests from organizations looking to do very dynamic app creation, right? They don't want to be reliant on users updating the application every 3 months when they push out something. So instead, they really structure their application so that they can change a string or an integer on the back end and have it update live various
yeah.
layouts or other things in their application too. So we can talk about that.
Sure, sure.
So let's actually go to the database side of things, right? So I'm using NoSQL, I'm using Firebase in this case. And as I've continuously iterated or reiterated, right, we have lots of collections here. We have different collections, but each collection is going to have lots of documents. And ideally, we want the document information to stay small, right? So I have all my user documents in the user collection. I have all my meals for the app in my meals collection, right? I have these are actual onboarding options that I'm pulling
Yeah.
into the app. So like I said, if you're making a dynamic or white labeled application, maybe this is something you'll do where you'll store like admin information in your backend, right? Company information or onboarding options. That way they can be changed in a split second if you ever need to update them. So you can see the way this information is structured, right? We want documents that contain small bits of information, but we will make a lot of documents. I'll pause just for a moment. Hopefully most users would be familiar with creating something like this, right? If
Yeah.
they're started with Flutterflow, but I wanted to stop and
They,
see
they
if there.
should they should they should created a very long video on database structuring and
Nice.
with Flutterflow. So I'm pretty sure tons of people should be able to do that.
Perfect. Nice, right? And one of the things a lot of users have questions on are subcollections. When to use subcollections for their data, right? So in this case, I don't have any subcollections because none of the information I'm saving per se needs to be grouped within another collection, at least in my opinion, right? So in this case, meals, right? I'm just saving meals as a list for users or the meal options. I'm just saving all the options for meals directly in that document because they're
Yeah.
relatively small, right? Um, if you were to view what a meal looked like, right? It's a name, it's how many calories, ingredients, some allergens. So really not much there. Now, if the meals contained a lot of information, right? If the meals, let's think, right? If there were recommended um, sides, right? Recommended sides with each meal, and we had a full breakdown of each side, then maybe that would be a sub collection of a meal,
Yeah.
right? Because we're only going to read that data maybe when we call the meal, and we want all of that saved within the meal, right? So if we delete the meal, ideally it would save all or delete all the sub collections as well. So, and I'll show an example of this too when you're actually building, right? When there are good use cases to use that.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Nice.
I'm glad you touched on that. You know, the child collections or the sub collections. Yeah,
Mhm.
people kind of find, yeah, it's something that people find very difficult to use. You know,
Yeah.
when do I use a sub collection? Before you jump into the other side, like I wanna ask a question that I usually get asked: when do you call in a document, and when do you call in a reference? You know,
Got
if
it.
you're, yeah, when do you say, hey, this is going to be a reference of the other feed, or this is going to be a document
Hmm.
of the other feed
Are you saying that in terms of the page structure or for a database?
for a database?
Got it. That is a good question. In this case, you couldn't save a document, and maybe I'm misunderstanding here, right?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Sorry, it has to be under,
A
page,
query? Are you
page,
talking about
yeah,
like a query or something like that?
yeah. When you're sending data from one page to another. So since we're talking about database, I just wanted to chip that in.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So this is something that depends on one, if you plan to have shareable links for your application. That's a big one, I would argue. Also, if you plan to um, how I'm trying to think of a good use case here. I'll just give an example, right? In this case, I have a dashboard with meals, right? And because the actual meals themselves, I'm not allowing users to send this page anywhere. I don't have any share action for this page itself. What I'm doing is only passing the document itself that I'm querying, right? So here on the dashboard, I'm querying a list of meals, right? Just a list of documents.
Yeah,
And when I click on one, I'm passing the entire document itself because I don't want to have to re-query the document because I've already queried it on this list, right? The staggered view. So it's totally fine because I have the document here. It's passing all the document data to this page and we're fine. Now, if I wanted a user to be able to share this page, for example, right, then I would need to pass the document reference because I need to be able to query that specific document since I'm not coming from any other page, right? I'm going directly to this page.
Yeah.
So in this case, I would need to pass a document reference and I would need to query the document reference on this page. So if I shared this with someone, right, they could access the page. It would probably have the document ID as a parameter at the end of the page. And then the page would load from that document ID. Hopefully that makes sense, right? So it's
Awesome.
going to depend
Awesome.
on your specific use case.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. It does. It does. It does. Thank
Nice.
you.
Yeah. That's a great question. When it comes to using subcollections, this is a question we get a lot, right? The biggest thing I would say is first watch, if you're using Firebase, right? Go to the Firebase YouTube channel. They have a great, I think it's a 5-part series on Firestore security, the way to structure documents, right? What should go in documents, how they should relate to one another. It's a really great series that they put together.
Yeah.
And with that, I would say the biggest tip here, put information that you don't want users to have immediate access to within subcollections, right? So here's an example. If you had a friends list, right? And when somebody clicks add friend, you have to add a friend to your list and their list, right? Well, I don't want users to be able to go and edit another person's user document, right? I just want them to edit the friends subcollection under that user document. So they would have no ability to write anything to the user collection specifically, only have access to add a friend to the friends subcollection. That's one way to really shape security around your application, right? Because we don't want users going in and being able to edit each other's
Yeah. True.
documents,
True.
right? So that's an example, right? Maybe using a friends subcollection. Or another thing I like to do in other apps I've created, right? Say you have a main account, and then like in this example, I allow the person to add other social media profiles, right? So instead of saving those somewhere else here as just general collections, I'm saving
Yeah.
those as sub collections because ideally I'm only going to be accessing those when
Through the
I'm
user.
talking about the user. And if the user deletes their account in Firebase, now we have the great option with the delete user references, right? So ideally what would happen is the user would be deleted and the sub collection would be deleted
Will be
if you set
deleted.
it up
Yeah.
to have users. And that way you're not going to have empty documents that have sub collections, right? That was an issue we faced before we had the delete user references option.
Yeah, awesome. I think this also works if you're trying to keep some things like credit card details, financial details,
For sure.
where each of those details actually belong to a user. So you're not sharing any of those details with somebody else. And one thing I also like, Will, about the sub collection is that it's not accessible. It's not accessible from the
The main collection.
dashboard, the main collection. So nobody can write anything to it. If you're not in the application, you really can't write anything to it.
Yep.
I mean, I just love it that way. Like, so for me, that's the one a bit stuff. So whenever I'm doing something that relates to maybe very, very vital information about a particular user, I just, create some collection and put everything in there.
Nice. Yes, that's a great way to structure your database, right? That way you don't have an issue when you have 10,000 users and you say, "Wait a minute, I'm revealing all this information that might be potentially private, right, to anyone that reads a user document." I think that's a mistake that a lot of people face the first time they're creating a Flutterflow application, right? They just
Yeah,
throw
true.
everything in the user's collection and think that's a good way to do it. So
Yeah, you're right.
nice. So those are like two of the big things, right? Another thing, of course, you're going to want to go through the rules of your application and set those up. If you haven't worked with the delete user references section yet, definitely would explore that. That way, when a user requests to delete their account, you can delete other data associated, right? So
With those
that
accounts,
might be for example, a social media uh, app, right? Where when a user is deleted, I want to delete all the profile or all the posts that they had. That way, when I query the user reference, it's
it
not
doesn't come
null,
up.
right? And breaks your app. That was a big issue before is no one knew how to write the cloud function to delete the users. So you delete the user and kind of be screwed because there's also not a way to update all the documents at the same time unless you
Sure.
also write a cloud function. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
we're
it's
slowly
awesome.
getting there. We're slowly getting there in terms of like uh, scalable solutions, right, for everybody to use to maintain a better backend and also make sure their app looks better.
Yeah, I really love the work that Flutterflow is doing. I mean, if there's anything I like about Flutterflow is how fast you're able to ship updates. Some of the platform that I'm quite familiar with, it takes months. It takes like maybe shipping updates like every 4 months, sometime every 6 months. But I mean, I could just pump into my mail this weekend and I'd be like, hey, what's new with Flutterflow? And there's something, that future you've been expecting, you've been cracking your head about. It's just right there. And okay, for example, I was working on a social media application and I wanted to implement rich test. And that week, I had implemented it via a code, built a custom widget and just
Yeah.
implemented it. And a day after, a day after, I just got an email. Oh my God, I was a day after I just got an email and people say, "Hey Paul, guess what we just shipped? Widget is now available." I said, "Oh no!" So, so I so I have to go back to the application all over again and be like, "No, my widget, no, take away, take away, take away," and
That's funny.
slap the widget all around the place.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's one thing we have spoken about as a team. Is like there's been a lot of requests for like a stable version of Flutterflow or more insights into what features are coming. That way, users can truly plan for what's to come. So that's something we're actually working on internally. We're actually releasing a new community forum. I'm in the middle of building it right now, where that will contain two things, right? Just a general wish list for the product, but also an integrations wish list. Because we're getting to the point where a lot of users are requesting backend integrations or other more advanced features. So we're going to let the Flutterflow community decide and really vote on popular either integrations or just general suggestions for the platform. And hopefully you'll be able to see what we're working on a little bit better than what we have right now.
I mean, that's really gonna be awesome. It's gonna be
Yeah.
awesome. So we don't, nobody wants to have a heart attack. I mean, the next morning.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Nice. And yeah, I can jump back into things. Like here's another, I'm going to be revealing all my many projects, but here's an app I'm working on right now, right? It's an app for gamers who can go on and create lobbies to play with one another through different games, right? So I have all sorts of things going on. I have lobbies for people to chat in, right? I've integrated with Discord via an API call to create voice channels for every lobby. I have user profiles, right? With accounts and games and an about section. I have all these different pages. And you'll notice in the back end, this is exactly what I was talking about, right? So
Yeah.
for a user, I have their game profiles, I have account profiles, and I have friends as a sub collection. Or for games, right? I have game info. And also another thing to think about is when you're querying your data, right? When I'm querying a game in this application, I typically only want the title and the cover, right? But if I were to save all this other info, these other lists, I would have just added, n number of reads
Bro.
every single time a user has a game shown, which is a lot, right, through a gaming application. So the nice part about this is when I'm just showing the game, I'm only reading two
Two things.
variables in the document, right? Versus reading all of these others. And then when I query just the subcollection, right, I'm only querying the subcollection. So keep that in mind, the way we query, right? You're not querying the collection and all the subcollections when you're querying a document, right? You're just querying that document. Or if you're in a subcollection, you're just querying that subcollection
Single.
document.
Yeah, I think this also make it very, very fast. I mean, super fast for you to, jump in there, get the information you want to get, and just, get out of that collection.
For sure. That's exactly right. Right. And again, this is repeated through the new like delete function, right? And I think something we need to work on from a Flutterflow side is extending that delete user cloud function to other options, not just like a tagged user, but setting it up for other collections, right? So for example, right now, like an issue I'm facing in my apps is I have lobbies and I have chats, right? Now, if a user deletes a chat, I have to delete the chat, but also all the chat messages associated, or else I'm just going to have an empty document with a sub collection. So that's something where I'm going to have to figure out how to write a cloud function to delete the chats or the lobbies, right? That's an example of the downside potentially of a sub collection, right? You need to be able to delete both sets of documents. Otherwise, you're going to have an empty document and a sub
Yeah.
collection within that empty document.
But I think you can also do stuff on Flutterflow that you can also write a conditional statement or a filtering statement to say if this particular collection is empty, or if it's returning a count that is less than zero,
Yeah.
that is less than one, don't show it. So I think that
Yes,
might be a way. That might be a way, instead of writing a cloud function, that might be a way to
for
fix
sure.
it. Because if it's not going to show it, then it's not going to break.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think so. Like for some of these, right, short-term solutions, I've just added a is deleted Boolean, and I'm not showcasing that,
Oh,
right?
that's good.
Right. And so I've done that for like users in previously before we had this delete user option. I just had is a user deleted, right? That way, if someone ever tried to query that document, it would just send, and then I had a stack or a bottom sheet appear, something that said like this user is deleted. That's maybe a short-term workaround if you don't have
Yeah,
the development background, right? To write something that actually deletes everything.
that's super awesome. That's awesome. I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna use this.
Nice. Yeah, so let me jump back into the meal planner app because I just want to show, um, I just want to highlight this was something I was playing around with, a link preview custom widget that maybe I'll try to release, where, right, for like a social media feed, if you detected there was a URL in a post, then this would pop up, right? And it pulls the featured image and some other stuff from the website URL. So I'm playing around with that in this application, but some of the things, right, that you can do to improve your application, like the number of read and writes, maybe
Yeah,
not writes in this case, but reads. If you don't structure your database correctly, or you're querying, every single widget in your application, you are going to be hitting 50,000 reads, no problem, right? Which is a big issue. If you structure your data correctly, though,
yeah,
Firebase can be a very powerful platform, as can any other backend solution, right? Like I said, Flutterflow stores data about like it needs to know every time you change a property to update the application. So imagine the number of reads and writes that Flutterflow has for its hundreds of thousands of users. So
yeah,
definitely a usable and scalable application, right? We're still around. It's not costing us billions of dollars to run this, right? So that's one thing I want to highlight. And when you use backend caching, that's how you resolve that, right? So we have
Yeah.
like options here, right? You can use backend caching when you're going to have options that aren't changing much. So if I want these, let's say, allergens to appear multiple times across my application, let me just turn on backend caching. I think I have it in a component, so I'd have to go to the component, but
Yeah.
right, I could turn on backend caching and do it at app level because maybe I want to use this throughout my app. Or in this case, since it's a component, I could just do component level. So anytime I use this component, it's already loaded up and saved. Um, so super powerful tools to reduce the number of reads, right, through implementing backend caching.
Yeah, I really love this feature. You know, like we talked about it before. I really love this feature that it saves you time and you can reuse one query all over your application,
Yes.
especially when you're doing profiles. You know, there are if you're running a social media application and you have profiles everywhere. So I think this feature is going to come in handy since you can just query the profile at once and use it everywhere. But I think one other part that I'd love to ask,
Hmm.
when you have a social media profile, a social media application, where you have maybe you're displaying 2,000, or maybe let's say you're displaying like maybe 500 rows, or sometimes infinity number of rows,
Hmm.
you get to see this. It keeps rolling, you just keep rolling, especially if it's a video. So if it's like a video platform, it just keeps rolling, keeps rolling. My users are freaking out about that thing, they're freaking out about it.
Hmm.
What do I don't want to see row. I don't want to see row. I just want everything to load.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate search?
Yeah, I will say for the video widget, I think that's one we need to improve personally because a lot of people are trying to make like TikTok style or video focused applications. And the current Flutter widget that we support is just, it's a slow widget, right? It has to initialize every single time it loads. So if you're trying to do like a Tinder or Bumble style swipe app with video, right? Every time you swipe, it's gonna
It
do the
keeps
loading indicator, right? And then it's gonna load, and then you have to do it again. So some short-term solution to that. Um, Not necessarily to speed up loading time, but to make a better user experience would be to use the loading widgets, right? And adjust what the backend query loading widget is. So, for example, right, if you go to a social media site, one might be LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn, typically before everything loads, you see gray, uh, like a grayed out version of the entire application, right? And I can actually show you that in action, right? So, for example, here in this application, it might take a while for all of my lobbies to actually load
yeah,
in this application. So what I've done is put together, well, that's an empty state widget. Let me actually showcase the query, right? So here I've created a component that's just a blank component, right, of that lobby card. So all I did was just take this component, I duplicated it and just named it loading at the end, right? And then I removed any of the icons, and anywhere
yeah,
there's text, I just added a container with a gray background. So that way, when it's loading, it'll be, a bunch of these, and then it'll be ideally a smoother user experience because it's not just a loading indicator. The user knows what to expect, right? So say you had a video that's loading. I don't think you can do loading states for video. That's a little bit challenging. But any like query you're doing, right? Ideally try to add a component or maybe an image, or sometimes I even customize the loading indicator depending on the location, right? Um, so yeah, if like for example in this application, our loading indicator is yellow, but in some spots where there's a quick like load that needs to occur, a quick query, I don't want a yellow dot to appear 5 places on the screen. So I individually go to each spot where it's loading, and I change the color of the loading indicator to match the background. So it might just be blank or look blank for a second, 2 seconds, but it looks a lot better than seeing 5 yellow dots appear and then disappear, right? Exactly. So
Yeah, sure it does. So I think we're running like 40 minutes.
nice.
Let's just quickly cover a few other things about the
Yeah.
database setup. Probably, I think there's something you've not talked about, data type. When do you get to use a data type instead of
Yes.
the normal custom feeds that comes with Flutterflow?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of different use cases for data types, right? One of the big ones is addresses, right? Instead of having your document have a address line 1, address line 2, city, or at least for the US, right? City, state, zip code, all of that.
Yeah,
Um, you could create that as just one data type and add it as a data type, name the data type address, and then use that anywhere in your documents. Or in this case, right, I have regions, but every region I use in my app has a flag and a name, right? And I want those grouped together, right? I don't want those in two separate lists. I want that
yeah,
information stored together. So in this case, now I could have, you know, a list of regions where the regions contain two necessary, references or whatever, right, that I need. So, another data type I've used in the past would be really like, I'm trying to think of a specific use case, but anytime you're needing to group data together, maybe
like
in a
card
list
details.
or other things.
Like if you're grouping card details, like expiry date.
Yep.
Once,
Yes.
yeah, I can't remember card details. Expiry date. What else? Okay, just
Uh,
card.
yeah, your card number, right? Expiry date, maybe
Yeah,
a
card number.
security code or SV or CVC or whatever it's considered. Yeah, that's a great
Yeah,
point.
yeah. Thanks, Will. So did Flutterflow just launched a super base art, which is awesome. I
Yep.
mean, they're giving every other platform now a run for their money with super base. But so I think the question in everybody's mind right now is when do I stick? Because I know the Firebase is very scalable.
Hmm.
Like Firebase is scalable. Like there are tons of huge companies relying on Firebase for everything.
Yep.
When do I stick with Firebase? When do I run to Superbase? And when do I run to a platform like Zeno? I know Flutterflow,
Hmm.
support all of this, but when do I run
Yep.
to all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say if you are okay, so I'll give you my background to start because I have very little development experience. I am a product designer at heart. I was a website developer and designer. I knew the extent of my coding knowledge was CSS and HTML. So if you want to consider that coding, great, right? Maybe that's offending people that
Oh,
are building apps or other things.
yeah,
I didn't know PHP. I didn't know anything there, right? So for me, the easiest solution for backend to get started with was Firebase because Flutterflow had the most documentation on it. There were more tutorials on it than any other backend solution. So for me, getting started in Flutterflow, Firebase was the best solution. Now,
yeah,
I think, for example, your background, right? You came from a more developer focused background or a more technical background. Maybe you're more familiar with a SQL database. That's when I would say, now that you can actually use Supabase auth, maybe go the Supabase direction. The power of Flutterflow is you can choose any backend integration, right? And that's something we're truly working towards. I know right now we only natively support Supabase and Firebase, but we are working towards and in conversation with Xano, right? With AppWrite, with backend lists, with Deskree, right? These are four backend solutions that are working. We're working together right now that are actually working on marketplace items, right? To start, where you could immediately go in and, right, here's an example, right? Clone this app template and go right away and start using that backend solution. That's a starting point. we're working on making it easier for these companies to be integrated natively into Flutterflow. So that's something you can hopefully look forward to throughout the year.
I mean, it's gonna be crazy, Will. Like supporting support base is one thing, which is awesome, but supporting Zeno, my goodness,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure your savers is gonna break because
Yes. Yeah. And
people
I'm hoping,
people
like, please head over to the community forum when we launch the new one, because all of these companies, right? All these integrations are going to be listed there. So we want people to be voting, telling us this is the, we've heard Xana over and over, like, and I'm sure that'll be probably one of the top voted products. So
top like yeah, Zeno is gonna have all the votes like because I've used I built with Bubble, and Zeno
yeah,
is like the cream of every backend solution. It is
yeah,
though expensive, yeah.
yeah,
Superbase is way cheaper. I spoke to the CEO of a no code solution right now, of a no code builder that tells me, says he builds everything on Superbase. To host the entire company on Superbase costs only $24 a month. But to host a project built with their platform cost about $159 a month, which was
yeah.
which was really crazy. So now to host a project is more expensive than than
The back end database, yeah, that's crazy.
so Zeno it's super expensive, but I think almost nothing can actually beat the speed. Almost no other
Got it.
no code tool can beat the speed, and it comes with ready-made endpoints. I think that's the awesome thing about Zeno. I mean, Firebase, Flutterflow plus Zeno, man, it's gonna change the world.
Nice. Yeah, we appreciate that. I'll definitely take that and continue to push for it, right? Um, Something we're definitely in communication with all of those companies. So we're working towards something, right? As a starting point at least.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by. I know it's way more than 40 minutes right now. So we are like 46 minutes. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for stopping by. It was great having this conversation with you. Even I myself, I have better understanding of database, even though I've been building for months. And I mean, it's just awesome. Just really hope that you join me again because I really want to pick your brain about how you started, how you built with Flutterflow, and how you even sold those products. Because one thing that I've seen in the no-code ecosystem is the ability for people to start building, jump on the next shiny idea, start, jump on the next shiny idea. So people don't really finish things. They gotta start things, they don't finish it. So that's something that I think you've done over and over again, and it's something that I would love to pick your brain on. And hopefully that'll be for a podcast. So no coding, no Firebase, just your brain and me. Thank you very much, Will.
That sounds great. That sounds great. I appreciate it.
So I'm gonna be coming to your DM pretty soon. Maybe Monday I'm gonna be coming.
Awesome. No, that sounds good. I look forward to it, right? Anything no code, low code, Flutterflow, I'm here for it.
Wow, thank you so much, Will. Really appreciate you. So just gonna end the stream. And guys, so yeah, if you want to say thank you, shout out to Will, feel free to leave a comment section. And if you have a question for him, don't worry, I have his Twitter DM, I have his Twitter. So it's gonna answer as many questions as possible. So if you have a question for him, feel free to leave it in the comment section, and I'll definitely do well to reach out to him. Will, thank you very much once again. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for joining this stream. Bye.